I was fired for reporting widespread fraud. My revenge came as a hostile takeover. The atmosphere in the boardroom was thick, quiet, and cold. I slid a heavy manila folder across the polished oak table. Inside were documents detailing years of securities fraud, revenue inflation, and internal conspiracy. My former boss, Warren Sloan, chief financial officer, stared at the folder. His face, usually flushed with the confidence of untouchable power, was draining to a pale gray. "You have two options, Warren," I said, my voice calm, steady, echoing the authority of the CEO's chair I now occupied. "Sign your formal resignation and testify for the prosecution, or face immediate criminal charges based on the documents right here." Warren's hand trembled as he reached for the folder. He knew exactly what was inside, the evidence I had compiled. I watched him, feeling no triumph, only the cold satisfaction of justice finally served. I had been fired, escorted out of the building like a criminal for doing the right thing. You won't believe how this quiet internal auditor turned into the most satisfying revenge I've ever served. But before I tell you how I completely destroyed Warren Sloan's career and executed the ultimate hostile takeover, smash that subscribe button, because justice stories like this don't come around often. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. My name is Holden Ames. I'm 35 years old, and for 6 years, I worked as a senior internal auditor at Kinetic Energy Solutions. We weren't a Silicon Valley startup, but we were a major player in utility infrastructure software, the kind of company that affects millions of people but operates quietly in the background. My job wasn't glamorous. I managed compliance, audited finances, and enforced the structural integrity of the company's reporting. I was the financial immune system, the person whose job it was to look for the things everyone else wanted to hide. And I was good at it. My life outside work was my grounding. My wife, Corinne, was a kindergarten teacher. Pure kindness and stability. We had a small house, 2 dogs, and a comfortable, predictable routine. That sense of safety was important, especially when dealing with the high-pressure, ethically gray world of corporate auditing. My boss, Warren Sloan, the CFO, was the company's architect of chaos and charm. He was intimidating, brilliant with investors, and had a dangerous reputation for making problems disappear. "Holden," Warren would tell me over scotch, "you have integrity. That's your strength. But remember this. In this business, secrets are just revenue streams. Your job is to make sure our secrets stay profitable and, more importantly, stay legal." I thought he respected my integrity. I didn't realize he saw it as a useful temporary barrier he intended to demolish when it suited him. The emotional bead of warmth I held on to was the pride Corinne had in my work. "You're the one who keeps everything honest, Holden. That's a powerful thing." I carried that responsibility seriously. The company was riding a huge wave of growth, and Warren was riding it hard. But the speed of the growth and the pressure to maintain it was starting to create cracks in the ethical foundation. I started noticing small errors, things I flagged and corrected, but which kept reappearing. I didn't realize these small errors were just flares marking a disaster zone. Warren and the board trusted that my loyalty to the company outweighed my loyalty to the truth. They were about to learn that they had fundamentally misjudged my moral code. The betrayal didn't arrive subtly. It hit me like a physical blow during a routine audit. I was performing a final compliance check before the end of the fiscal quarter. My job was to verify revenue tied to new contracts. Warren's report showed revenue up by 30%. Fantastic. But when I cross-referenced the revenue with the legal contracts, I found the disaster. Several large multi-million-dollar contracts were entirely fake. They existed only in the company ledger. Ghost contracts created to inflate quarterly earnings and satisfy the board and investors. The revenue was entirely fabricated. This wasn't negligence. This was securities fraud. I spent a terrifying weekend verifying the scope. The total revenue inflation was staggering, designed to keep the stock price artificially high. Warren Sloan was the architect of the scheme. Monday morning, I followed protocol. I generated an internal, encrypted whistleblower report detailing the findings and naming the key executives involved, including Warren Sloan. 48 hours later, I was called into a meeting. Warren was there along with Bryce Jennings, head of legal. Warren didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Holden, we received your internal report. That report is highly inaccurate and damaging to the firm's reputation." "The documents are conclusive, Warren," I said, trying to hold my ground. "We have fabricated revenue streams. That's criminal." Warren leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "We are restructuring the internal audit department. Your position has been eliminated due to redundancy, effective immediately." "You're firing me for reporting fraud?" I felt the heat rising in my face. "You're being terminated without cause. You will receive a generous severance package contingent on you signing a non-disclosure agreement that prohibits you from ever discussing any internal matters of this company. Figure it out yourself, Holden. You take the money, sign the papers, and you disappear." Bryce Jennings placed the termination package on the table. It was over. They had used the legal process to shield themselves, firing the whistleblower under the guise of restructuring. My immediate reaction was not rage, but a chilling sense of clarity. They had violated the ultimate trust, the truth. What Warren and the board didn't know was that I had been the internal architect of their systems for 6 years. They fired the auditor, but they couldn't fire the man who knew where all the bodies were buried. I walked out of Kinetic Energy Solutions for the last time. Security escorted me to my desk, my colleagues watching in silence. In the parking lot, I didn't scream. I opened my laptop. They had revoked my official credentials, but they had forgotten my deep knowledge of the system architecture. Before I was cut off, I used a remote back door I had established years ago, designed for disaster recovery, not for revenge, to download a massive archive of all internal financial reports, executive communications, and the full codebase for the reporting software. I now had the complete, systemic evidence of the fraud, the core lie that underpinned their entire operation. Retention hook. Holden discovers the systemic nature of the fraud is tied to a specific external entity. I spent the next 2 months working from my garage building my case. This wasn't just a handful of fake contracts. The fraud was tied to a specific type of investment vehicle only used by one major external stakeholder, Alastair Finch, head of the massive hedge fund Aegis Capital. Aegis was Kinetic's largest investor. They had been pouring money into Kinetic based on the inflated revenue reports. I reasoned that Alastair Finch was either complicit in the fraud or, more likely, completely unaware and a massive victim. I hired a corporate and securities lawyer, Celia Rhodes. She listened to my story with growing horror, reviewing the documented fraud, the whistleblower retaliation, and the evidence of the shell companies used to route the fake payments. "Mr. Ames," Celia said, pushing the pile of evidence away, "this is a nuclear case. You can sue for millions for wrongful termination, but if we go after the fraud, we risk destroying the company entirely." "I don't want money," I said. "I want the fraud exposed, and I want Warren Sloan to face accountability."
I didn't want to simply sue Kinetic. I wanted to control it. The only person who had the power to do that was Alastair Finch. I had enough to trigger an SEC investigation that would crash Kinetic's stock. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to come back and expose Warren from the top. My master plan was complex, audacious, and leveraged Alastair Finch's greed against Warren's fraud. I instructed Celia to contact Alastair Finch directly, not as a lawyer seeking a suit, but as an internal auditor with information proving Kinetic Energy's collapse was imminent. Alastair Finch met me in a secure, neutral location within 48 hours. He was sharp, ruthless, and immediately understood the magnitude of the fraud. I laid out the core findings, the inflated revenue reports, the fake contracts, and the clear paper trail leading back to Warren Sloan. "Mr. Finch," I concluded, "you are investing in a lie. When this breaks, your fund will lose billions and Kinetic will cease to exist." Alistair stared at the evidence for a long moment. He didn't blink. He smiled. "You're right. This is massive. But why are you bringing this to me? Why not the SEC?" "Because the SEC will destroy the company and you'll lose your investment. I have the evidence to expose Warren Sloan, but I also have the technical knowledge to rebuild Kinetic after he's gone. I built the infrastructure. I know the real weaknesses." The strategic revelation, Alistair saw the opportunity. If he could take control of the company before the fraud became public, he could write down the losses, clean up the management, and salvage his multi-billion-dollar investment. Alistair looked at me, a calculated gleam in his eyes. "I'm launching a hostile takeover bid for Kinetic Energy Solutions, but I'll only do it on one condition. You run the company after I take over. You will be the new chairman, CEO, whatever you want. You are the only person who knows where the rod is." I didn't hesitate. Done. Warren and Bryce thought they were dealing with a simple firing lawsuit. They were about to learn they had messed with the man who was coming back to dismantle them, backed by a hedge fund with billions in capital. The hostile takeover bid was launched publicly, blindsiding the board. Alistair Finch cited unacceptable management practices and concerns over financial stability as the reason for his immediate attempt to acquire the remaining shares. Warren and the board fought back desperately, spending millions on legal defense and PR firms to maintain control. They accused Alistair of market manipulation. I played my part meticulously. I fed Alistair's team targeted legal leaks of general management irregularities, never revealing the core fraud, but creating enough public doubt to keep the stock price depressed and weaken the board's defense. The first consequence was delivered when the media began questioning Warren's accounting practices. The takeover battle lasted 6 grueling weeks. It was brutal, expensive, and public. Finally, Alistair secured the majority vote. The takeover succeeded. My phone rang 2 minutes after the final vote was tallied. It was Alistair. "Congratulations, Mr. Ames. You are now the chairman of the board and interim CEO of Kinetic Energy Solutions." Warren and Bryce thought they were dealing with a simple firing lawsuit. They were about to learn they had messed with the man who was coming back to dismantle them, backed by a hedge fund with billions in capital. The hostile takeover bid was launched publicly, blindsiding the board's defense. Alistair Finch cited unacceptable management practices and concerns over financial stability as the reason for his immediate attempt to acquire the remaining shares. Warren and the board fought back desperately, spending millions on legal defense and PR firms to maintain control. They accused Alistair of market manipulation. I played my part meticulously. I fed Alistair's team targeted legal leaks of general management irregularities, never revealing the core fraud, but creating enough public doubt to keep the stock price depressed and weaken the board's defense. The first consequence was delivered when the media began questioning Warren's accounting practices. The takeover battle lasted 6 grueling weeks. It was brutal, expensive, and public. Finally, Alistair secured the majority vote. The takeover succeeded. My phone rang 2 minutes after the final vote was tallied. It was Alistair. "Congratulations, Mr. Ames. You are now the chairman of the board and interim CEO of Kinetic Energy Solutions." Warren's panic and desperate attempts to fix turned into sheer terror when he realized the whistleblower who exposed him was now his boss. Bryce Jennings called me, thinking I was still on his side, asking if the rumors about Holden Ames were true. I simply told him, the new leadership believes in accountability. Warren had escaped consequences for years by using his power to fire the truth. Now I had the power to fire the lie. My first day back was the ultimate climax. I called an immediate mandatory board meeting. Warren and Bryce walked into the conference room, arrogant but tense, expecting a standard leadership transition. They saw me sitting calmly at the head of the table. Warren's face went from pale to purple. "Holden, what is the meaning of this?" "Sit down, Warren," I said, using the same dismissive, cold tone he had used with me during my firing. "The meaning is accountability. I'm the new chairman and CEO." I slid the heavy manila folder across the table toward him. Inside were the documents he thought I had buried, the fabricated contracts, the shell company transfers, and my original whistleblower report. "The fraud stops now, Warren," I stated. "I reported you, I tracked you, and I returned to dismantle the structure you built on lies. The internal audit found the truth." Warren stammered, denying everything. Bryce Jennings immediately tried to distance himself, claiming he was just following orders. I cut him off. "Bryce, your immediate termination is effective as of this moment. Your role in the retaliation and cover-up is documented. Security will escort you." Bryce was led away in stunned public humiliation. I turned back to Warren for the face-to-face revelation. "Your two options are still on the table. Either sign your resignation and testify for the prosecution, or the new board submits the full file to the U.S. Attorney's Office this afternoon." Warren saw his life flash before his eyes. His corporate career, his freedom, his reputation, all gone. He signed his resignation. Every page. Community validation and support followed instantly. Alistair Finch praised the new leadership for rooting out corruption. The stock stabilized. The industry saw Kinetic Energy start a painful but necessary journey toward integrity. Justice fully served. I didn't take the job for the power. I took it to ensure justice was done and that the company could operate honestly. I used my old knowledge to install new governance systems, making it impossible for another Warren Sloan to ever exist at Kinetic. I hired a new CFO who valued transparency. Corrine asked me if it was worth the risk. I tell her, what I learned is integrity is the only true due diligence. Revenge doesn't fix pain, it measures it. But exposing the rot and rebuilding something honest, that changes everything. If you enjoyed seeing corporate executives get what they deserved, you'll love my next story about a woman who discovered her business partner, who was her own sister, had been stealing from their company for years. The betrayal goes even deeper than you would expect. Smash that subscribe button if you believe accountability is the only way to run a business. What is the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Share in the comments. I read every one.